Hey everyone, Romeo here, a fellow Spanish language learner. Over the past few months, you've probably seen me using the Spanish learning app that I've been building. It's called Structured Recall. Structured Recall is a speaking app that helps Spanish learners practice turning English sentences into spoken Spanish. Instead of simply recognizing Spanish when you see it or hear it, you are forced to retrieve it from memory, just like you have to do in real conversation. The goal is to turn Spanish that you understand into Spanish that you can actually say. Recently, however, I've had a couple of people ask me a real good question. Who is Structured Recall actually for? And I realized I never really answered that question in a full video. Because the truth is, unfortunately, I don't recommend it to everyone. In fact, I tell a lot of people not to buy it. Now, that might sound like a terrible business strategy, and I think it is. Do I want Structured Recall to be successful? Absolutely. I spent a tremendous amount of time building it. I genuinely believe it's a valuable tool, and I still accept feedback from my existing users to integrate it so that it could be one of the best Spanish-speaking learning tools available. But I'd rather lose a sale than have someone buy the wrong tool. So, who is it for? My answer is very simple. I recommend Structured Recall once you can honestly say that you understand Spanish grammar. I thought about simply saying Structured Recall is for intermediate Spanish learners, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that that isn't accurate. The problem is that intermediate doesn't really tell me anything. I've met plenty of people who call themselves intermediate, but they still haven't built a solid understanding of Spanish grammar. They don't yet know when to use one tense instead of another, or when to use lo versus la, or ley versus se, or they can't even recognize why one structure is correct and another one isn't. That's why I don't think labels like intermediate are very useful. So instead of using labels like beginner or intermediate, I think it's much more useful to ask a different question. Do you already understand Spanish grammar? Because that's the real dividing line. Not that you're perfect or that you've memorized every exception, but that you've already studied the grammar. Meaning that when you read Spanish, you recognize what's happening. You know why a particular tense was chosen. You understand what the pronouns are doing. And you understand why se lo di means what it means. In other words, the grammar itself is no longer a mystery. Because Structured Recall doesn't teach grammar. It stress tests grammar. Those are two completely different jobs. Let me give you an example. If I read the sentence, ya se lo di, I immediately knows what it means. It means I already gave it to him, or it can mean I already gave it to her. Nothing about that confuses me anymore. But if you gave me the English sentence first and asked me to produce the Spanish, I might pause for a split second while I choose the correct pronouns. Not because I don't know them, because I have to retrieve them. That's the gap Structured Recall is designed to close. It's designed to make grammar that you already understand easier to retrieve when it's time to speak. And I actually got reminded of this about a week ago. Last week, I spent 4 days at the Occidental Punta Cana resort in the Dominican Republic with a friend. To my surprise, and unlike other resorts I've stayed at, almost no one spoke English. Outside of the front desk staff, there really wasn't much English around me. Even most of the guests were Spanish speakers. So for 4 days, I had almost no choice but to rely on my Spanish. This wasn't limited to the resort either. On the resort, I had many different situations come up. I had to explain to guest services how they gave us a room that was different from the room that we paid for. I had to describe to our maintenance crew how our toilet was essentially stopped up and non-functional. I had to explain to the bar manager how the outdoor food service was consistently dirty. And of course, I had to talk to housekeeping. But I was also taking taxis around town. And in those situations, I was explaining places that I had been before. And I had to negotiate prices at bars when they wanted to charge me gringo prices. And I had conversations with people at a local barbershop when I got my hair cut. And I even spent time in a cigar shop talking with people there. So for 4 straight days, my Spanish was being stress tested. And that's exactly why the trip was so valuable. It wasn't testing whether I knew Spanish grammar. It was testing whether I can retrieve that grammar quickly enough while trying to communicate. And here's what I noticed. I functioned reasonably well. And as I previously talked about, I've already reached a level of Spanish fluency where I no longer need to reach for a translator app. People understood me, and I, for the most part, understood them. But I can also just feel myself making grammar decisions while I was speaking. Sometimes I'd automatically say lo when I actually needed to say la. Or I'd catch myself choosing fui instead of estuve, or even estuve instead of estuvimos. Not because I was taking a grammar test, but because that's what my real conversations required. Those weren't grammar problems anymore. They were retrieval problems. I already understood the rules. What I needed was a way to retrieve them faster while I was speaking. And that's exactly where structured recall has fit into my own learning. So yes, I'd love to tell everyone to buy structured recall, but I honestly can't do that because not everyone has the problem that structured recall solves. If you still need to learn Spanish grammar, if you still don't understand why one tense is used instead of another, if object pronouns still confuse you, then structured recall isn't the right tool for you. Learn the grammar first. That's why I still recommend Complete Spanish Step by Step to beginners. That book's job is to teach you how Spanish grammar works, but Structured Recall has a different job. Its job is to help you retrieve grammar that you already understand. So, here's the simplest way I can answer the question. If you read a sentence like ya se lo di and immediately understand what it means, but if I asked you to produce that same sentence from English, you'd hesitate, you're probably the type of learner Structured Recall was built for. And if that sounds like the problem that you're trying to solve, then Structured Recall was built for someone like you. If you enjoyed this video and you appreciate honest recommendations, even when they mean telling people not to buy something, go ahead and give this video a like. It really helps the channel reach more serious Spanish learners who are looking for practical advice instead of shortcuts. And as always, good luck on your journey to building more functional, usable Spanish. Peace. Later, she will find the passports in the bag. She will find them. Más tarde, ella encontrará los pasaportes en la bolsa. Ella los encontrará.
Más tarde ella encontrará los pasaportes en la bolsa. Ella los encontrará.
Correct. Soon we will carry the bags through the airport. We will carry them. Pronto nosotros llevaremos los bolsos por el aeropuerto. Nosotros los llevaremos.
Pronto nosotros llevaremos las bolsas por el aeropuerto. Nosotros las llevaremos.
Correct. Next week, they will confirm the flights at the counter. They will confirm it. La próxima semana, ellos confirmarán el vuelo en el mostrador. Ellos lo confirmarán.
La próxima semana ellos confirmarán el vuelo en el mostrador. Ellos lo confirmarán.
Correct.